Hello, Brave Nation, and welcome to episode 30 of BraveHawk Talk presented by Pepsi. Pepsi, that's what I like. I'm John Gross. I hope all of you had a safe and happy holiday season. Now, today's show is a little bit different than a typical episode. We'll start off with a discussion with baseball's Jacob Morrison, and then we are joined by Associate AD for Communications and Strategic Initiatives Todd Anderson to break down our top 5 best Uncp athletics moments from the past year. Now, Jacob Morrison was in the midst of his best collegiate season when the pandemic hit. He and his teammates, though, are determined to pick up where they left off when the season starts up this spring. Here's this week's Scotland Health Student Athlete of the Week, pitcher Jacob Morrison. Jacob, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to speak with you. I saw your tweet that you had gotten into a doctor of physical therapy program at Lynchburg, and that's obviously a big accomplishment. So, first of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here. Appreciate it.
I want to start off going back to last season. I think you would be hard-pressed to find any team in all of college athletics that was hotter than the UNCP baseball team. You end the season 11 straight wins, cap it off with a win against an in-state rival in Wingate. What was it like to be a part of the team during those, eventually was the final 11 games of the season?
Yeah, man, last year's team was a lot of fun. We were riding high, playing some really good baseball, having a lot of fun while we were doing it. Hopefully we can do the same thing this year, but last year was a whole lot of fun.
When you look at the pitching staff, too, I mean, the numbers were just tremendous. Compared to the previous season back in 2019, as a unit, team at a 6.17 ERA. Last year that was down to just a 3.53 ERA. What improvements did you notice in the pitching staff that led to that jump in success?
I wouldn't even say it was necessarily an improvement based on talent and pitching. It was more so just the team clicked a little better. We were all rooting for each other and had confidence in each other, knowing you could hand it off to the next guy and everything would be just fine. And that confidence goes a long way in success. So I think that was more so what helped us.
So as a group, you guys really feed off of each other?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
And even looking at your individual numbers from last year, I know you moved into more of a starter role from predominantly a reliever in the previous year. What was that transition like for you?
Well, the previous year, I actually began the year as a starter. I was coming off of elbow surgery, and I didn't do so hot, so I lost that job pretty quickly. But I got an opportunity last year, and my arm was healthy and had a really good offense backing me up, and things just started to work out for me and for the team.
Yeah, 4-0 record, 3.72 ERA, 31 strikeouts to just 8 walks. I know you've had a kind of winding career, multiple different stops, battled some injuries. So what was that like for you to finally just have a phenomenal season and go out there and just pitch gems every start pretty much?
I mean, nothing compares to what we had last season. Like you said, this is my third college in 5 years now. So to finally find somewhere that's home and to have some success as a program, there's nothing that beats that.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey to UNCP. I know out of high school, you initially went to Savannah State. What was your recruitment process like going to college?
So out of high school, I felt like I was just one of those kids who kind of fell through the cracks. I only had one Division I offer, and I was one of those kids who thought it was D1 or bust. I know better than that now, but at the time I was immature and young, and I took that offer and ran with it. Went to Savannah State my freshman year, and we weren't so hot as a team. I didn't do so hot as an individual pitcher, and I decided it just wasn't the best place for me academically or athletically.
Then you go to USC Lancaster, and then from there you again transfer. How did you end up at UNCP?
Well, USC Lancaster is a junior college in South Carolina. So I had a couple friends who went there out of high school and were playing ball. So I talked to them after I decided I was leaving Savannah State decided Lancaster would be a good spot for me. I really enjoyed it there in my first semester that fall. And then in the spring, things were looking good. We had a really good team. I got hurt in the first inning of the first game of the year. So my recruiting process diminished pretty quickly after I had a season-ending injury. But Pembroke, luckily, had seen me just a couple weeks before me. Coach Jefferson had come to see us practice, and thankfully he liked what he saw enough to offer me even though I was having surgery.
A couple minutes ago, you referred to UNCP as home. Why?
Pembroke just feels like, I think it's the group of guys and like the group of people at Pembroke that make it feel like home. There's just like we're a family, from the coaching staff to every single player on the team. We can hang out any night of the week, and like it's never awkward. Nothing ever changes. It's just like coming home for the holidays and spending time with family. It's just a bunch of laughs and a really good time.
And it's obviously been a very successful program, and while last year's season was cut short, we're thrilled for this year's campaign. What are your goals individually for this upcoming 2021 season?
Individually, my goals are to just help this team as much as possible, whether that's a starter again or a reliever, whatever the case may be. I know every single one of us have the same goal, and that's to end the season with a ring on our finger. And so I'm just trying to do anything I can to help us get there.
What do you think it'll take for you guys to get that ring on your finger?
Just pick up where we left off from, man. This is a different team. We only lost a couple guys, but we got a whole lot of new guys. So it's just being able to find that click and being able to ride with it and stay hot throughout the year. I know the season got cut shorter this year by 10 games, I believe. So every game matters that much more. We just got to be on top of everything from day one.
You mentioned earlier that as a pitching staff, you guys kind of feed off of each other. But UNCP is known nationally for its offense, putting up boatloads of runs, game in, game out. We saw a whole lot of scoring last year. I'm curious, as a pitcher on this team, how much does that help you too, knowing that you go out there, you pitch a gem, your offense is going to back you up?
It is really fun pitching in a program like that. I told some of our freshmen this fall, when they were getting hit around a little bit, I said, hey man, as much as it stinks now, like that these guys are really good hitters, you'll really appreciate it come the springtime.
That's awesome. So as we opened up this podcast, we discussed how you were just accepted into the Doctor of Physical Therapy program at the University of Lynchburg. Why do you want to go into that field of work?
So I was actually an English education major whenever I started school. And it wasn't until after my injury my sophomore year, and I went through physical therapy, and like that was my first ever experience with PT, that I decided that might be something I was interested in. So after talking to my therapist and a couple other people, I decided that was something I was really going to pursue. And I was lucky enough to get an internship at that same PT clinic the following summer and absolutely fell in love with it. And I've been pursuing that ever since.
What was your internship experience like?
I worked pretty much as a physical therapy aide. So whatever the therapist, if the therapist needed help with any patients, I get to take them through a couple of the exercises. I get to learn different techniques on therapy and kind of the rhyme and reason behind each exercise. And then kind of some dirty work just around the clinic, like doing laundry, cleaning tables, stuff like that.
That's awesome. And it's definitely helpful to really anyone who plays sports. At some point in your career, you'll probably, hopefully not, but most likely you'll have to go to a physical therapist. And I know your program, we talked about before this interview started, your program starts just a couple days after this season could potentially end. You make it all the way. Then how long does it last?
So the program is about 2.5 years. I would start in the summer of 2021, and I would graduate in the spring of 2024.
Wow. That's amazing stuff. So do you hope to one day own a practice, or do you just want to work somewhere?
The plan is to hopefully own my own clinic one day and be catered more towards athletes, serious high school athletes, collegiate athletes, and some professionals, hopefully. So that's the end goal. And
now that you have some insight into the field of physical therapy and how the body works and recovers, has that helped you in your baseball career?
Oh, it has, 100%, because now whenever I know that something isn't feeling right in my mechanics or in my body, I can try a couple different exercises to kind of figure out where I'm going wrong or what's going wrong, and I kind of have a rough idea, at least, of how to fix it.
Do guys in the team bug you a lot if they feel like they have something up? They ask you questions about it?
Oh, no. We just go to Muscle White. He's our guy for all that.
Cool. Well, that's amazing, and it's really a great thing to do. As we said, you'll be helping a lot of people working as a physical therapist. So best of luck with that. And we would like to end with a question that'll make you think a little bit. 2020 has been a very difficult year for everyone. 2021 is just around the corner. Thankfully, what is your number one wish for 2021?
My number one wish for 2021 is that we get to play a full season without any interruptions.
Awesome. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed that that's the case, because great things are certainly ahead for this program. We saw last year end on an 11-game win streak, and we're excited for this team to pick up where you guys left off. So, Jacob, thank you so much for your time today. Best of luck this season, and congrats on getting into Lynchburg.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Jacob, and we are excited for the 2021 season to start. 2020 has been a difficult year for many, so today we're going to focus on some bright spots, and there were certainly a lot of bright spots in the world of UNC Pembroke athletics over the past 12 months. From championships to records and everything in between, 2020 will go down as one of the most successful years in UNCP athletics history. So today I'm joined by Todd Anderson to discuss some of the top moments from this year in UNC Pembroke athletics. Todd, the year is coming to an end, and despite how many negative things happened in 2020, a lot of people have said that this was the best year, one of the best years in UNCP athletics history when you look at what happened in the spring. So I brought you on the show. First of all, thank you for coming on, but I brought you on to break down your top 5 moments of this year, top 5 best moments. So thanks for hopping on, and I'm looking forward to this.
I appreciate it, and just want to fit in a quick thanks before we talk about the best moments. But in relation to you saying 2020 is coming to an end, all I have to say is thank goodness. So
yes,
and that's the only negative we're gonna mention today.
Yes, best moments, and there were many great moments. So this was very difficult. We spent a long time mulling over these decisions. We will go one by one with our top 5, and we will throw in some honorable mentions at the end. Todd, you ready to roll?
Absolutely.
All right. Number 5, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Number 5, I would have to say, it's all of mine are pretty top moments. It's hard to narrow them down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but if I had to nestle them in, I want to go with Joshua Chepkasir's entire 2020. It pretty much started in the fall of 19 with his cross-country performances, but you're talking about a guy that gets All-American in 2 events at indoor track before the pandemic cuts it short. He's in Birmingham. He doesn't get to compete, but he still gets All-American in both the 3,000 and the 5,000 meter run. And then heading in, once we resume, the cross country is the only one that's had a full season so far. Cross country, he breaks his own meet record at the Peach Belt Conference Championship race and gets. You hate to see a season like that cut short, but he looked destined to repeat as an All-American again at the NCAA championships. But I would say just Joshua Chepkesir's performance in this calendar year. I mean, and there's more to come, obviously, from him.
Todd, great minds think alike. I had Josh at number 5 as well. You mentioned his success in the winter and spring and this fall. He won his 3rd straight Peach Belt Conference cross-country championship, and as you said, shattered personal and course records in doing so. So we both have Joshua Chepkesir in at number 5. Let's hear number 4.
Number 4, I'm going to go with, and I talked to you beforehand before I got on the show. I'm going to loop all of men's basketball season together here. I actually skipped one, and I'm going to go back to it probably at 3 because I moved it up a little bit. And this kind of relates to men's basketball season. But Akia Pruitt's milestones with rebounding and with points, and the PBC championship, and Tony Jones being named interim head coach and eventually getting PBC Coach of the Year, and then to cap it all off in March, Drew Richards comes back to take over the program. I just think it's men's basketball season was ridiculously full of headlines throughout 2020, and of course, is what I mentioned with Chepkesir. I mean, there's more to come with men's basketball.
Great answer. I will have to go a different route for number 4. I think Paul O'Neill winning his 700th game as a head coach is a remarkable feat. That not only speaks to longevity, but more so success. I mean, you could be coaching for a long time, but you need to be able to win those games. And he'd be the first person to say that he gives all the credit in the world to his assistants and his student athletes. But it's truly a remarkable accomplishment, and you see how much his players love him, the Do It for 6 hashtag. They play hard for him. And to win 700 games in a career, regardless of the sport, is nothing short of remarkable. So that's my number 4. Let's move on to number 3.
Well, I sort of skipped this one already. Sort of looped this in with men's basketball, but I think Sean Kirk getting drafted by the Harlem Globetrotters. He was the only really college basketball player that was drafted. I mean, he was drafted with stars and a nun and everything else. But the cool thing about that was that I actually got the opportunity to find out that he was going to be drafted by the Globetrotters about a week before it happened. And the Globetrotters swore him to secrecy and said, hey, you can't announce this until we announce it on our social media. And it was just cool to sort of put yourself in Sean Kirk's place, and that Harlem Globetrotters jersey coming in the mail, and being able to take a picture in the Harlem Globetrotters jersey. And you're talking, I mean, this is a kid that works his butt off on the court, and meant so much to the men's basketball program throughout the season. Unfortunately, we only had him for that one season, but he definitely made an impact, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do with the Globetrotters.
I love that answer, and like you said, well, he just played here for one season, a massive impact, signing with the Globetrotters, and let's not forget what was a whole lot of fun for all of us when he was in the Dark Horse Dunker contest, got all the way to the finals,
Yep.
and everyone was working
also
hard.
Frustrating for us.
Yes, also frustrating, but equally fun, and he really put his name on the map. I mean, his name has been on the map for years, but that's definitely a great accomplishment by him, and we look forward to that. I'm going to put at number 3 UNCP's move for 15 of its 16 sports to Conference Carolinas. You're moving back to a conference that UNCP has been a part of from 1976 to 92 before making the jump to Division II. Again, 15 of 16 teams playing under one umbrella. That's the first time that's happened in UNCP history. And I think one of the really cool things, too, is the resurgence of some of these regional rivalries. Yes, we'd play a Francis Marion every year, and that certainly just geographically and similar schools is a rivalry. But you have a lot of these schools where decades ago you have alumni come back and say, I remember a game against Barton, or I remember a game against this school or that school. And now UNCP and student athletes will have an opportunity to compete against those schools and rekindle those rivalries. So that's number 3 for me, and I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, and Conference Carolina's huge move just for and I'm not forecasting immediate success by any means, but it's a successful move for us in the fact that most of our kids are going to be able to spend a little bit more time in the classroom because they don't have as many overnight trips. They don't have as many 5-6 hour trips that we had that we still have in the Peach Belt Conference for the rest of this year. But it's a strategic move for the success of the athletic department. And you mentioned the rivalries. I mean, we had rivalries with many of these schools that we're about to play in the regular season conference schedule. I mean, Barton, back when we were in Conference Carolinas the first time, Barton was actually known by a different name. They were Atlantic Christian. And, I mean, you have a lot of teams that we already have established rivalries with, and I agree with you. It's important to rekindle those rivalries. And you mentioned Francis Marion, the fact that they're coming with us, that they're switching conferences with us. I mean, that gives that's a natural rivalry in itself because we're so close to each other. So I think it was important in the announcement that both of us were really going together and rejoining Conference Carolinas for us. And Francis Marion, of course, it's their first time in the conference.
And on the rivalry topic, I mean, we'd play some of these Conference Carolina schools in non-conference games, but might not have been every single year, might have been different sports, not every sport, but now just to be playing these schools every year, it'll build a rivalry. It'll, again, rekindle those rivalries, so that should be a lot of fun, all right? So we have 5 through 3. You ready for number 2?
I just want to sort of expand on your rivalry things. I mean, there's some rivalries I'm already looking forward to in Conference Carolina. I mean, you're talking about baseball's rivalry with Mount Olive that can be rekindled. I mean, those two teams, they go at each other every time they play each other. North Greenville is going to be another team that baseball is going to have to deal with as well. I mean, you have the same things in the other sports. It doesn't just stop at baseball. So everyone that said, okay, well, you're not in the Peach Belt Conference anymore, you're going to Conference Carolina as well. I mean, the competition is just as stiff as Conference Carolinas as it is in the Peach Belt Conference.
Absolutely. And one last note on that, of course, the only team that won't be joining Conference Carolinas is football, who will remain in the Mountain East Conference.
Yeah, and difficult. Football is a difficult thing right now as far as Conference Carolinas goes. There's some teams in Conference Carolinas that are adding football, and it'll bring, if we were in Conference Carolinas and Conference Carolinas had a football league, I think there'd only be like 5 or 6 teams that first year. So you have the difficulty, and everybody's like, well, all these teams are joining, why don't we just join our own conference? Well, the difficulties presented, if you only have 5 conference games, the difficulty presented in finding 6 non-conference games to fill the rest of your schedule. And for those that have never dealt with scheduling non-conference opponents, particularly in football, I can tell you it's a beast of a task. Just because you gotta have matching weeks where the opponent that you're searching out has an open week, and it doesn't always work out. So this leaves us the opportunity to still compete in the league and still compete for conference championships, maybe somewhere down the road as more and more teams sort of entertain adding football, that maybe down the road that Conference Carolinas would have a football league as well.
Absolutely. As you said, some Conference Carolina schools starting to create some football programs, so we'll see what happens there. Number 2.
Well, this is going to be a big one. I actually had, and as we move forward to Conference Carolinas, I had that as probably my top story of the year. But my second story, which is probably going to be year number 1, so we're going to flip-flop it here. The month of February for us with all the conference championships and the regional title and everything in that note. It was just a fun month to be a part of. And you mentioned it. You mentioned it already with the best month in school history at the beginning of when you welcomed me. The best month in school history. Definitely in my 14 and a half years here, that was probably, I can't remember a more successful 30 to 35 days. Not all the championships were in February, but they were close enough. I think wrestling's regional took place on March 1st, so we sort of lump it into February. But that was just a fun month to be a part of. We were all busy behind the scenes, and it's pretty awesome to have that amount of success in such a short period of time. And to see all the kids' faces when we welcome them back with welcome back parties and things of that nature. So that's probably my number two. As I said, we already covered my number one, so I'm going to have to comment when you get to number one because you already covered mine.
So number two, you mentioned that February frenzy. I've kind of divided that up into two parts. I'll start off with number two,
okay.
The conference championships aspect of it. We had 4 conference championships: men's basketball, swimming, wrestling, women's indoor track and field. A couple of those programs, their first conference championship. That was a lot of fun. Like you said, it seemed like every week there was a conference title up for grabs, and every week UNCP won a conference title. So it was pretty awesome. And of course, when the student athletes came back this fall and we presented them with those beautiful Baron rings, I know you got a couple as well. Those are pretty sweet. Just an overall awesome experience.
Yeah, I mean, and you're talking about the teams that pulled these off. A lot of them did it in comeback fashion. A lot of them did it with the chips stacked against them. I think men's basketball was the favorite heading into their conference tournament, and or was the favorite heading in there towards the end and into the conference tournament. I mean, they won the first regular season championship outright in PVC history for our teams. But you talk about swimming. They came back the last 2 days to beat Fairmont State. Fairmont State was the favorite in the Mountain East Conference heading into the swimming championships, and thanks to the athletes on our team, Natalia Silva, Ketlin Rodriguez Matos, the other Natalia. I mean, they were able to pose a comeback. I think they were down 40 points either going into the second last day or the last day, and they were able to pull it out. And then indoor track and field, I think we went in as one of the favorites in women's indoor track and field in the Mountain East Conference Championships. But to see what they did and how they did it, and as many individual titles as they won to sort of cement it. And then I think you got to talk about wrestling here. I think wrestling probably wasn't the favorite going in, but once they got things going, I mean, you're talking about a top 10 team in Notre Dame of Ohio was at that championships. You're talking about West Liberty, who's a solid wrestling team. So for wrestling to get 4 individual conference championships and be able to pull that out, that's a feat in itself.
And how about the fact that for 3 of these programs that won a conference championship in the winter, it was their first year in the Mountain East Conference: swimming, wrestling, women's indoor track and field. I mean, welcome to the MEC. It was almost a clean sweep across the board for UNCP.
Yeah, I mean, you got to say the Mountain East Conference, I mean, probably a little bit happy that we're moving over to Conference Carolina since we took them by storm in the first year. So, I mean, I agree. I mean, women's swimming and diving in 4th season, they're already winning a conference title. I mean, they still got another chance to do it this year in the Mountain East Conference when they go back up to Canton, Ohio for those conference championships. I mean, women's indoor track. I mean, once you get the first one out of the way, the second, third, fourth one should roll in a little bit easier. You got that monkey off your back. So, I mean, a lot for these teams to build on, a lot for them to take into the future. They've already built a strong foundation for their program. So I'm excited to see where they go from here.
All right, so we've gotten 5 through 2. Let's move on to number 1. I know we discussed what I believe your number 1 is a little bit before, but Todd, if there's anything that you'd like to add.
No, I mean, it's the Conference Carolinas to me. I mean, that's a huge announcement for us. It sets us up for sets us up for success moving forward. I mean, it's a change of scenery. It's shorter trips. I've already mentioned that, but I mean, again, the rivalries is in the fact that our fans have an easier time traveling to these schools that we're playing. I think it's going to be huge for our athletic department.
And my number 1, as I said a couple minutes ago, I kind of split up that month of February. I have wrestling winning the Super Regional title, which is just the second NCAA Division II regional title in UNCP history, which in and of itself is a milestone accomplishment. But you couple that with the fact that it happened at Lumbee Guarantee Bank Court. UNCP fans were able to come and see it. And going into it, you just felt that it was, I don't want to say expected, but you just felt good about UNCP's chances. At least I personally did. And they come away with a pretty convincing Super Regional title. A whole lot of momentum with that program. And we know with the way that last year's season was cut short after that Super Regional title and the conference championship, they're hungry for more in this 2021 campaign.
Yeah, and you talk about, I mean, they continued an outstanding tradition of, I think they had either five or six guys that qualified for the NCAA championships. I mean, you had some individual conference titles with Nick Key and Nick Daggett and Logan Saliga, or region titles for those three. And I'm sure I'm missing one, but those guys, they go to South Dakota and they're there getting ready to wrestle. I mean, Nick Key is still undefeated at this point, and then they get their seasons cut short. But that doesn't diminish by any means what that team accomplished last year. I mean, they had a brutal dual meet schedule that took them to Las Vegas, that took them to Colorado on a bus trip, or a bus trip through Colorado and Kansas. So, I mean, those guys really brought it together at the end, and I think they were steamrolling there at the end. So it's kind of disappointing to me that you didn't see how those guys that went up to the NCAA championships, how they were able to perform. Maybe we bring back another national championship, an individual national championship. Certainly Nick Key, undefeated, had a really strong chance. Nick Daggett, another one that was surging at the end, he had a chance to bring back a national title as well. So it's disappointing that they weren't able to sort of complete their postseason road, but I mean, you gotta hand it to them. I mean, they accomplished a lot of things in 2020.
Right, and you touched on it in the super regional championship. 3 Braves won. Nick Daggett at 125, Logan Saliga at 133, Nick Key at 197. And then Tyler McCosey, Caleb Warner, and Brendan Sloop were all runners-up in their respective weight classes. So those are our top 5, and I think possibly even more remarkable than the top 5 is the amount of honorable mentions that I have. Yep. I'm not sure which ones you have listed, but it was such a successful year that I spent a little bit of time with Jen Smith and Bull Slave in crafting this list. Do you have any honorable mentions you want to throw out there?
Well, I mean, I thought of one along the way, and I talked to you. I didn't really have a list of honorable mentions, but I mean, one that I can think of right offhand, and we go back to the pandemic cutting things short and being able to see how things would have finished out. I think you got to look at the baseball program. Yep. 11-game winning streak. They just handled a nationally ranked Wingate team pretty handily on the road at Wingate's place. That team's really coming together. They had their pitching underneath them. They were obviously hitting the ball as they tend to do on a consistent basis. So would have liked to have seen them finish it out. I think they had been nationally ranked the week going into when their season was cut short. And then they beat Wingate, a very strong Wingate team on the road. Would have liked to have seen them move into the top 20 the next week. But, I mean, as we see, and I actually haven't put this up on the website yet, but they're going to go into the new season with a top 15 ranking in the Collegiate Baseball Magazine poll. Obviously, my poll, the poll I handle, the NCBWA poll, we won't vote on that until January. But I imagine you sort of see the same thing. So, again, going back to my original point, I would have liked to have seen how the baseball season finished out. I think they were destined for probably a 40-win season.
Absolutely, and I spoke actually earlier in this podcast with pitcher Jacob Morrison about just that. He said the team was in a great place, on a roll. Like you said, 11 straight wins, capped it off with a win against an in-state rival in Wingate, and major expectations, well-earned expectations, and hopes for this baseball team come the spring. So here's the list of honorable mentions that we came up with. Then again, these were not in our top 5, but I think you could easily interchange them with some of our top 5 selections. In no particular order, these are just honorable mentions. Mallory Leviner pitched a perfect game. Coach Brittany Bennett became the winningest softball coach in UNCP history. Coach Haskins won his 300th game at UNCP. Ethan Bonkham set the program home run record. You mentioned Sean Kirk being drafted by the Globetrotters. I have that in my honorable mentions. You also touched on Akia Pruitt becoming the Peach Belt Conference all-time leading rebounder. And lastly, something that hasn't necessarily gotten into effect, or at least fans haven't had the opportunity to utilize it yet, a transition to online ticketing, which will make things a lot easier moving forward. So those are the honorable mentions, and wow, what a year it was.
Absolutely, and I think all those honorable mentions could easily fit in the top 5. If you had a 6, I think all of them would be outstanding candidates for number 6. I think that Bull Slavin's work to get hometown ticketing on board for us for the future. We're obviously going to announce that pretty soon. Hopefully we get to utilize it soon with fans in the stands, but I'll have to see how this whole worldwide pandemic shakes out. But obviously a huge year for us, and it bodes well as we move into the spring, and then we move into Conference Carolinas in 21-22.
And lastly, for those listeners out there, we are asking you to submit your top 5 as well. Submit it to us on social media. I believe we'll be sending out some information as well with their top 5. Feel free to dispute our top 5s. I know these could be very controversial because, as we just discussed, there were so many iconic and incredible moments from the 2020 calendar year that you can debate us as much as you want, and feel free to, again, send in your top 5 moments from 2020. But Todd, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate you, John. Thanks for having me. I would also like to fit in on a personal note and with my department, probably right around 6 or 7, the fact that John Gross came back to broadcast another season and Jen Smith came back to participate in another marketing and promotions campaign. That would easily be in my top 10 as well.
Todd, you're the best. I didn't pay him to say that, I promise. But thank you so much, Todd, and Happy New Year to everyone out there. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. A reminder, follow us on all of our social media platforms at UNCP_sports, and also subscribe to our YouTube page. We'll be back next Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week, and remember to mask up.